There is no clock here, no alarm waiting beside your bed, no glowing rectangle on the wall telling you that it is 6 in the morning or 7 or 8. Instead, you wake because someone has moved beside you. Not deliberately. There are simply too many people in this room for anyone to sleep without occasionally disturbing someone else. For a few seconds, you do not know where you are. The air is warm around your face, but the rest of you is cold. You pull the blanket a little higher. There is a smell of smoke. Not the pleasant smell of a fireplace in a modern house where the chimney carries most of it neatly outside. This smoke is simply part of the room. It has soaked into the wood above you. It lives in the wool hanging from the walls. It has worked its way into your hair and your clothes and probably the blankets themselves. Somewhere nearby, somebody coughs. Then you hear a low crackle. The fire. It never really went out. It could not afford to. The longhouse is still mostly dark. There is no bright morning light pouring through a large window. There are no electric lights. There may be a few openings in the roof or walls, depending on the house, but for the moment they are mostly useless. The darkness outside is still stronger than the light inside. You lie still and listen. A baby is making a small, unhappy noise somewhere toward the other end of the room. Someone whispers. A dog shifts its weight on the packed earth. You hear claws against the floor. Then there is a sound from outside. A sheep. One short bleat. Another answers. And now, very gradually, you realize something. The village is beginning to wake. Not all at once. There is no single moment when everybody gets up. It happens in layers. A person near the fire moves first. Then someone else. A wooden bowl is lifted. A door opens. Cold air enters. Someone mutters because the cold air has entered. The door closes. And you understand something that will be true of almost every day you spend here. There is nowhere to be alone. Not really. You are in a Viking village. And before we go any further, I want you to forget almost everything you have seen in modern pictures of Vikings. Forget the enormous warrior standing on a beach with a horned helmet. Forget the perfectly clean wooden ships cutting dramatically through blue water. Forget the idea that every man here is preparing for battle. Most people in a Viking Age settlement are doing something much less dramatic. They are feeding animals, repairing clothing, carrying water, grinding grain, cutting wood, cooking, cleaning, arguing, trading, raising children, trying to keep the roof from leaking, trying to keep the fire alive, trying to make sure there will still be enough food when the weather turns. And that last part matters more than almost anything. Because if you want to understand what life in a Viking village was really like, you have to begin with something that sounds almost disappointingly ordinary. Food. Not raiding. Not treasure. Not swords. Food. Where it comes from. How long it lasts. Who controls it. And what happens when there isn't enough. So stay where you are for another moment. The fire is beginning to brighten. The smoke is moving slowly toward the roof. Somebody is grinding grain. And outside, beyond the door, the first pale light of morning is beginning to appear over the settlement. Let's step outside. Quietly. Before everyone is awake. The first thing you notice is the cold. Inside the longhouse, your body had almost forgotten it. Outside, it finds you immediately. You step onto ground that is hard beneath your feet. The exact appearance of the village depends on where you are and when you have arrived, because there was no single Viking village that looked exactly like every other one. A settlement in Denmark is not going to look precisely like one in Iceland. A farming community in Norway has different problems from a trading settlement on the Swedish coast. But the basic logic is recognizable. Houses, animal pens, storage buildings, work areas, paths worn into the ground, fences, fields beyond them, and water somewhere nearby. Because water is never just scenery here. Water is drinking, cooking, washing, fishing, travel, trade, and sometimes danger. The village is still quiet. A thin layer of smoke rises from several roofs. One of the most beautiful things about seeing an early medieval settlement at dawn is also one of the least romantic. You can tell who is awake by the smoke. One household has already started the fire. another has not. A third is sending up a thick column because somebody has added damp wood. And somewhere nearby, a person is probably already annoyed about it. You walk farther. The houses are not arranged like a modern suburban neighbourhood. There is no road with carefully numbered buildings, no pavement, no streetlights, no neat separation between residential, commercial, and agricultural life. Life is mixed together. A chicken can wander through a working area. A dog can sleep beside a doorway. A goat can become interested in something you are carrying. A child can disappear around a corner and reappear somewhere entirely different. The village is not silent. It only feels silent because the sounds are small. A wooden bucket, footsteps, a hammer, a cough, a sheep, a creaking door, a bird, the wind. And underneath all of it, the almost continuous sound of human work. You pass one of the smaller buildings. This is not a longhouse. It is probably used for storage or another specific task. That distinction matters. People do not necessarily perform every activity inside the main living space. Some buildings exist because certain things are better kept away from the household. Food, tools, animals, craft work, and perhaps most importantly, fire. Fire is useful. Fire is necessary. Fire is also one of the easiest ways to destroy everything you own. That tension runs through the whole village. Almost everything around you is made from materials that can burn. Wood, thatch, wool, leather, straw, food, furniture, tools with wooden handles. A house can be warm and comfortable in the evening and terrifyingly vulnerable at midnight. You look back toward the longhouse. The door opens again. A woman steps outside. She is carrying a wooden vessel. She pauses. For a moment she looks at the sky. Not because she is admiring the sunrise. She is checking the weather. People who live close to the land become extremely good at reading small changes. Wind direction, clouds, temperature, the condition of animals, the feel of the soil, the timing of rain. These are not abstract subjects. They determine whether the harvest will succeed and whether winter will be tolerable. She disappears around the side of the house. A moment later, you hear water. And now the village is waking properly. A child starts crying. Someone calls for another person. A dog barks. A man emerges from a doorway carrying an axe. And somewhere behind you, the grinding stone begins again. Breakfast is coming. But breakfast here is not something that simply appears. Before anybody eats, somebody has to make it. And before somebody makes it, somebody has to grow it. Come inside again. The fire is brighter now. Your eyes have adjusted. You can finally see the room. The longhouse is not empty space. It is organized. People have places. Activities have places. Activities have places. The exact arrangement varies, but the central fire is one of the most important features. It provides heat, light, cooking, and companionship. Around it, life happens. Someone is preparing food. Someone else is working with wool. A child is watching. Another person is trying not to step on a dog. And at one side of the room, someone is grinding grain. This sound will become one of the background noises of your life here. Scrape, turn, scrape, turn. The grinding stone is heavy, and grain is heavy. That combination tells you something important. The food that seems simple on the table represents an enormous amount of labour. You might imagine bread as a food. The people here experience it as a chain. Land, ploughing, sowing, rain, sun, weeding, harvesting, drying, storage, grinding, mixing, cooking. Only then do you get something you can eat. And if one part fails, the whole chain becomes fragile. This is why grain storage matters so much. A wealthy household is not wealthy simply because it has beautiful objects. Its real security is often stored in things that are much less glamorous. Grain, livestock, dried food, salt, tools, land, connections to other households, and people who know how to make everything work. You watch the grinding. The movement is repetitive, almost hypnotic. It would be easy to imagine this as peaceful, but it is work. Hours of it. And the same is true of many things you are about to see. Viking Age life can look romantic from a distance because modern eyes tend to notice the things that survived beautifully. Jewellery, weapons, ships, carved wood, metalwork. But archaeology is full of less glamorous evidence. Charred seeds, animal bones, broken pottery, worn tools, fragments of cloth. These things tell you what daily life actually required. And the more you look at them, the more the Viking village begins to resemble something familiar. A place where almost everything depends on maintenance. The roof needs maintenance. The clothing needs maintenance. The tools need maintenance. The animals need maintenance. The food supply needs maintenance. The relationships between people need maintenance. Even the fire needs maintenance. Nothing simply stays functional. You sit near the hearth for a moment. Someone gives you a bowl. The food is not elaborate. It might be some form of porridge, perhaps grains cooked with water or milk. There may be dairy. There may be meat, depending on the household and the season. Fish may be important. Vegetables, herbs, berries, nuts, or other local foods can add variety. But this is not a restaurant. Nobody asks what you are in the mood for. The meal reflects what exists. That sounds obvious, but it changes the way you think about eating. Today, if you want strawberries in winter, you can buy them. Here, winter decides. If the harvest was poor, winter gets the final word. And that is why preservation becomes so important. Drying, smoking, salting, fermenting, storing. Every method extends the life of food, because there is no supermarket waiting at the edge of the village. There is only what you have, and what you can obtain. Look around the longhouse now. You might notice something strange. It is difficult to identify a private bedroom. There may be designated sleeping areas, benches, platforms, partitions, or different spaces depending on the house. But the modern idea of everybody having a separate room is absent. Privacy is limited. Sound travels, smells travel, heat travels, arguments travel, so do babies, so do dogs. And probably so does gossip. This is a world in which family life is much more visible. A person who is sick cannot simply close a door and be left alone. A child cannot quietly disappear into a bedroom. A couple cannot easily have a private conversation without the possibility of someone hearing. The household is a community before it is a collection of individuals. That does not mean people did not have personal feelings. Of course they did. It means the physical world gives those feelings less room. The house itself teaches you something about society. People live together, work together, eat together, sleep together, and depend upon one another. You notice the roof. It is darkened by smoke. There are no modern ventilation systems. The fire is doing its best. Your eyes may sting. Your clothes certainly smell. Over time, smoke has become part of the fabric of the building. There is something else you notice. The walls are not merely walls. They are protection. Against wind. Against rain. Against cold. The shape and materials of the house depend heavily on region and resources. But everywhere, the basic problem is the same. How do you create a warm human space inside a cold world? The answer is not central heating. It is architecture, fire, clothing, food, bodies, and constant work. You move closer to the fire. Immediately you feel the difference. Warmth on one side, cold on the other. This is another small reality of pre-modern life. Comfort is uneven. You are rarely perfectly warm. You are warm here, cold there, wet outside, dry inside, tired but not finished, hungry but waiting. Everything exists on a scale of compromise. And perhaps that is one of the most useful things to remember about the Viking village. People were not constantly miserable, but neither were they living in a permanent adventure. Most of life was ordinary, and ordinary life requires compromise. Let's go outside again. The sun is higher now. You can finally see the settlement properly. There are more people everywhere. A man is splitting wood. Someone is repairing a fence. Children are moving between adults. A woman is carrying something toward another building. Two people are talking beside a doorway. A group of animals is making its own argument about breakfast. This is the village economy in motion. And if you were expecting a place divided neatly into farmers and warriors, you are going to be disappointed. People have overlapping roles. A farmer can be a sailor. A landowner can fight. A craftsperson can farm. A woman can manage a household, produce textiles, supervise workers, handle trade, and have substantial authority within her home. A man can spend much of his year working rather than fighting. The word Viking itself can mislead modern people. It is better understood as a description of activity rather than a permanent occupation shared by everyone in Scandinavia. Going raiding was one thing. Living in a Scandinavian farming community was another. And the second occupied vastly more ordinary days. You pass a workshop. Now you hear a different sound. Metal against metal. A smith is working. This is one of the places where the village suddenly feels technologically sophisticated. The people here are not primitive in the sense that word is sometimes used. They possess specialized knowledge. Metalworking requires experience. Woodworking requires experience. Textile production requires enormous amounts of skill. Boat building requires astonishing practical knowledge. And all of it depends on people knowing how materials behave. Iron is not simply metal. It has to be extracted, worked, heated, shaped, repaired. Wood is not simply wood. Different trees behave differently. Different cuts matter. Different moisture levels matter. The same is true of wool. The same is true of leather. The same is true of food. The village is full of people who understand materials through their hands. You watch the smith. The fire glows. The metal changes. The hammer comes down. Again. 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 There is no factory, no assembly line. One person can spend a long time producing one useful object. And when that object is finished, it is expected to last. A knife is not disposable. A bucket is not disposable. A tool is not disposable. Clothing is repaired. Shoes are repaired. Buildings are repaired. Nothing is casually thrown away when it represents hours of labour. This makes the village feel strangely different. Modern life is full of objects designed to disappear from our attention. Here, objects remain visible. A damaged tool becomes somebody's problem. A broken garment becomes somebody's work. A cracked bowl becomes a repair. Everything has a history. Now come with me back into the longhouse. There is an assumption about Viking society that needs careful handling. The image of Viking life often focuses overwhelmingly on male warriors. But the household cannot function without the people who manage it. And women in many Viking Age societies could hold substantial responsibilities and property rights, though their precise position varied by place, period, and social status. The work inside the household is not secondary. It is the foundation. Textile production alone can consume enormous amounts of time. Preparing wool, spinning, weaving, dyeing, cutting, sewing, repairing. Clothing is not something you order. It is a process. You look at a finished garment and see cloth. Someone else sees months of work. The woman sitting near the loom is not merely making clothes. She is helping produce the household's physical survival. And textiles have another importance. They are wealth. They can be exchanged. They can represent status. They can be stored. They can travel. A finely produced garment is not just something you wear. It can communicate who you are. You watch the loom moving, back and forth, back and forth. The rhythm is strangely calming. Perhaps this is one reason so many of the tasks in the village seem repetitive. Repetition is not wasted time here. Repetition is production. The same movement produces the same useful result. Again, again, again. And perhaps that gives the day its own rhythm. There is less distinction between work and life because work is life. The person cooking is also feeding the household. The person spinning is producing clothing. The person caring for animals is protecting food. The person repairing a roof is protecting everyone beneath it. The person making a tool is making tomorrow possible. Now listen, there is laughter outside. Children. They are not playing with plastic toys. They are surrounded by the same world as adults: animals, wood, mud, water, tools, fire. The boundary between childhood and adult life is different from the one you know. That does not mean children are simply miniature adults. They play, they learn, they imitate, they get bored, they argue, they form friendships. But they also become useful earlier. A child can help with animals, carry things, watch younger children, collect fuel, assist with household work. The exact responsibilities depend on age, household, and circumstances. But the basic idea is simple. A family is an economic unit. Everyone eventually contributes. You watch a child trying to carry something that is slightly too heavy. An adult notices. The child refuses help. The adult insists. The child becomes annoyed. And suddenly the Viking Age feels less distant. That conversation could happen anywhere. The details change. The personalities do not. There is another side to childhood, though. Child mortality was high compared with modern societies. Disease, infection, accidents, malnutrition, and other dangers could take children who today would have been treated easily. This means families lived with a kind of uncertainty that is difficult to imagine. A child could be healthy one week and dangerously ill the next. There were forms of healing. People understood herbs, wounds, childbirth, bones, fever, and many other practical aspects of health. But they did not have modern medicine. No antibiotics, no modern surgery, no understanding of microbes. A minor injury could become serious, a fever could become frightening, and when someone became sick, the whole household had to adapt. You can feel the fragility of the system. The village is strong because everyone contributes. But that also means losing one person can create a surprising amount of difficulty. Step outside. A cow is looking at you. She does not care that you are from the 21st century. She would like you to move. Animals are everywhere. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, horses, dogs, chickens and other birds. The exact combination varies, but livestock is fundamental. Animals provide food, milk, meat, wool, leather, transport, fertilizer, status, and sometimes companionship. A cow is not simply a cow. She represents stored value. An animal can reproduce. That means it can create future animals. A sheep provides wool. Wool becomes clothing. Clothing protects people. So the sheep is connected indirectly to survival. This is why livestock management matters. Animals must be fed, protected, moved, watched, bred, and kept healthy. In winter, the problem becomes especially serious. Feed is limited. Animals consume food that humans could otherwise need. Yet losing animals can be disastrous. So every decision has consequences. You begin to understand why Viking Age farming was not simply about growing crops. It was an interconnected system. Crops feed people and animals. Animals provide manure. Manure improves fields. Fields produce future crops. Wool becomes clothing. Leather becomes equipment. Bones can become tools. Almost nothing is completely separate. The village works because many small systems support one another, and if one system fails, another has to compensate. Now imagine leaving the longhouse in winter without a modern coat. You would not last long. Clothing is not fashion here, it is technology. Wool is incredibly important. It provides warmth. It can be woven into cloth. It can be layered. It can be repaired. Linen is also used in some regions and households. Leather provides footwear and other useful items. People understand how to make garments that work in their environment. But clothing has another problem. It gets dirty. It gets wet. It wears out. And cleaning it requires labour. There is no washing machine, no dryer, no easy replacement. A garment that takes significant labour to produce is worth maintaining. You look at someone's clothing and you can read clues: status, occupation, region, resources, taste, perhaps even access to trade. Imported materials and luxury objects can tell you that a settlement is connected to much larger networks. Because the Viking world was not isolated, this is one of the great surprises. The village might look remote, but the people living here can be connected to an enormous trading world. Baltic routes, North Sea routes, river systems leading deep into Eastern Europe, connections reaching the British Isles, continental Europe, and beyond. Silver can travel astonishing distances. So can ideas. So can objects. So can people. The village is local. The world around it is not. Walk toward the water. The settlement changes as you approach. You smell salt. You hear gulls. You see boats. And suddenly the entire geography makes more sense. For Viking Age communities, the sea is not necessarily an obstacle. It can be a highway, a road that moves faster than walking over land, a means of reaching another settlement, a way to transport goods, a way to fish, a way to raid, a way to migrate, and a way to die. Because boats are powerful precisely because they are dangerous. Weather matters. Navigation matters. Wood matters. Ropes matter. Sails matter. Crew experience matters. You stand beside a boat. It is smaller than the heroic images might make you imagine. But even a relatively modest vessel represents an extraordinary amount of knowledge. The builders must understand how the hull behaves, how weight is distributed, how the ship moves through water, how to repair it, how to protect it, how to steer it. And everyone aboard must know what everyone else is doing. A boat is a community compressed into a moving wooden structure. There is no room for incompetence, and no room for ignoring the weather. Imagine leaving shore. The village gets smaller. The wind increases. The water changes. The person beside you is watching the horizon. Nobody has a weather app. The sky is the forecast. The waves are the forecast. The wind is the forecast. And sometimes the forecast is wrong. That is why the sea can inspire both confidence and fear. It offers opportunity. It also offers the simplest possible reminder that humans are not in control. Not every Viking Age settlement is a tiny, isolated farming village. Some are connected to major trading networks. Think about what happens when a trader arrives. The atmosphere changes. People want to know what he has. Silver, cloth, glass, ceramics, spices or other exotic materials in some contexts, metal goods, weapons, jewelry, objects from far away, and perhaps, just as importantly, stories. Because trade carries information. A traveller brings news. Who has died? Who has married? Who is fighting? Who has gained power? Which route is safe? Which route is dangerous? What is happening in another kingdom? A village can be geographically small and socially connected to a very large world. This makes the Viking Age feel surprisingly modern in one particular sense. People are curious. They want news. They want goods. They want better opportunities. They want to know what exists beyond the horizon. But the speed is radically different. A message does not cross the world instantly. A rumour can take weeks. A traveller can disappear for months. Someone who leaves by ship may not return. And that uncertainty changes relationships. You cannot casually text someone to ask whether they arrived safely. You wait, and wait. And eventually, perhaps, a ship appears. Or it doesn't. Now let's return to the village. There is an argument. You can hear raised voices. Nobody seems particularly surprised. Conflict is part of community life. But how do you settle it? There is no modern police department, no 911, no courtroom building waiting at the end of the road. Law exists through customs, assemblies, authority, reputation, compensation, and sometimes violence. One of the most important institutions is the assembly, often referred to by the Old Norse term thing. These gatherings could involve disputes, decisions, legal matters, and political relationships. Imagine standing among people who have come together. Someone has a complaint. Another person has a different version. Witnesses matter. Reputation matters. Family matters. Status matters. Memory matters. And everybody knows that the outcome may affect relationships for years. Because in a small community, you cannot simply disappear from the people you have argued with. You will see them tomorrow. You may trade with them next week. Your children may marry their children. Your families may depend upon one another. That creates an unusual tension. A dispute has to end somehow. But the relationship may need to continue. Compensation can therefore matter. So can negotiation. So can mediation. And sometimes things do not end peacefully. The famous image of Vikings as people who solve everything with axes is too simple. A functioning society cannot operate entirely through violence. There must be mechanisms for preventing every disagreement from becoming a blood feud. But violence remains a possibility. And the possibility itself changes behavior. Your reputation matters. Your family's reputation matters. Being seen as weak can have consequences. Being seen as unreasonable can also have consequences. The social world is watching. There is something exhausting about living in a small community. Everyone knows you. They know your parents. They know your children. They remember your mistakes. They remember your promises. They remember who helped you. They remember who didn't. Reputation is not an online profile. It is something carried by other people's memories. You cannot edit it. You cannot delete an embarrassing photograph. You cannot move to another city with a completely blank social history. Your identity is embedded in relationships. That can be comforting. If you are in trouble, people may come. If your house burns, others may help. If your animals are sick, someone may know what to do. If your child is missing, the whole settlement can search. Community is protection. But community is also surveillance. People notice. People talk. And privacy is scarce. This is one of the great contradictions of village life. The same closeness that keeps you safe can make you feel watched. You are never entirely alone. And perhaps that is why hospitality matters so much. A stranger is not merely an inconvenience. A traveller may bring information, trade, connections, news, but a stranger can also be dangerous. Hospitality, therefore, exists alongside caution. You welcome people, but you watch them. Imagine that you cut your hand. It does not look serious. A small injury, a little blood. You wrap it, you keep working. That is the natural reaction. But now imagine the wound becomes swollen, hot, painful. You develop a fever. The mood in the household changes. There is no modern clinic, no antibiotic waiting on a shelf. People have knowledge, herbal remedies, practical treatments, experience with wounds. But knowledge has limits, and sometimes a body simply cannot fight an infection. This is one of the hardest parts of imagining historical life. We know how many dangers have become ordinary medical problems today. A broken bone can be treated. An infection can often be treated. A difficult birth can sometimes be managed with modern intervention. A dangerous fever can be investigated. In the Viking Age, many of these situations remain uncertain, and uncertainty changes the emotional atmosphere of life. You do not assume that every illness will pass. You hope. You watch. You wait. Someone may pray. Someone may prepare medicine. Someone may send for help. And everyone listens to the person's breathing. This is not unique to Vikings. It is one of the universal experiences of living before modern medicine. But here, inside this small household, it becomes personal. Night has come again. The fire is burning. The village is darker. And this is when another part of Viking Age life becomes easier to imagine. Religion. The old Norse religious world was not simply a list of gods hanging above daily life like characters in a storybook. It was connected to fate, family, land, death, war, harvest, protection, luck. The supernatural world could exist alongside the ordinary one. Thor, Odin, Freyja, Freya, and many other figures belong to a complicated religious landscape that varied over time and place. But you do not necessarily need to imagine someone walking around the village all day announcing which god they believe in. Religion can be quieter than that. A ritual, a burial, an offering, a story, a symbol, a particular practice connected to a specific moment. The world is not divided as neatly between religious and ordinary as modern categories sometimes suggest. The boundary is more porous. The harvest can be practical and sacred. A burial can be social and religious. A voyage can be economic and spiritual. A feast can be political and ritual. And the stories people tell help explain the world around them. You sit near the fire. Someone is telling a story. You don't know whether every detail is true. That may not be the point. The story carries memory, warnings, values, family identity, ideas about courage, ideas about betrayal, ideas about fate. And perhaps most importantly, stories make the past useful. Now imagine the village on a good night, not an ordinary evening, a feast. The difference is immediate. More food, more drink, more people, more noise. Someone has prepared meat. There is bread. There may be fish, dairy products, whatever the household has been able to gather or preserve. Alcoholic drinks such as ale are important in many contexts, and feasting can have a social and political significance far beyond simply eating. A feast is where relationships are displayed. Who sits where? Who is invited? Who speaks? Who gives gifts? Who receives them? Who is missing? These details matter. A wealthy host is demonstrating capacity. Look what we can provide. Look how many people we can feed. Look at the quality of our food. Look at the objects we own. Look at the people who are willing to come here. Hospitality becomes a form of power. You eat. You listen. Someone laughs. Someone tells a story. A cup is passed. Someone begins singing. For a few hours, the village feels abundant. And this is important, because if you only describe historical hardship, you create a false picture. People in the past laughed. They celebrated. They flirted. They told jokes. They became drunk. They played games. They enjoyed music. They formed friendships. They fell in love. They complained about their neighbours. They had wonderful evenings. History is not only suffering. The feast is part of the evidence that life could be deeply enjoyable. Perhaps that is one reason people endured the difficult parts. Look toward the edge of the hall. Someone is playing a game. Games matter because they reveal something that statistics cannot. People need amusement. They need competition. They need stories. They need ways to pass time. Board games such as Nefatafel are associated with the Viking Age, though exactly how they were played could vary. Pieces have been found. Boards have been found. And now imagine sitting across from someone who is taking the game far too seriously. You move. They stare. You wait. They move. You realize that, despite having spent your entire day hauling water and helping with animals, you are now deeply invested in defeating this person. This is another moment when the Viking Age becomes ordinary. Competition is old. So is teasing. So is boredom. So is the need to find something interesting to do after the work is finished. Eventually, the conversation becomes quieter. People talk about family. Marriage in Viking Age societies was not simply a private romantic arrangement. It could connect families, property, status, alliances, expectations. But that does not mean affection was absent. People could love each other. They could miss each other. They could become jealous. They could argue. They could be devastated by loss. The surviving evidence can show us social structures more clearly than private emotions. But private emotions existed regardless. Imagine a woman waiting for someone who has gone to sea. She does not know exactly when he will return. She may not know whether he will return. Weeks pass, then months. A ship appears. She walks toward the shore. Maybe he is on it. Maybe he isn't. That uncertainty is part of the emotional geography of a maritime society. The sea connects people. It also separates them. And every departure carries both possibilities. Let's correct another image. Suppose a man from the village owns a sword. Does that mean he spends every day fighting? No. The sword itself may tell you something about status, wealth, and identity. Weapons are important, but they are not necessarily the centre of ordinary life. A farmer still has to farm. A landowner still has to manage land. A household still needs food. A boat still needs repair. A roof still leaks. Even the most ambitious warrior has to eat. And this is one of the reasons the Viking world is more interesting than the stereotype. The same person can occupy several worlds. Farmer, trader, sailor, fighter, father, son, neighbour, law participant, guest, host. The identities overlap. You cannot reduce the person to the weapon he carries. Now let's walk back toward the shore. The sun is low. A family is watching the water. They are waiting for someone. The ship should have returned. It has not. This is where the romance of Viking exploration becomes darker. We know the famous destinations: England, Ireland, Iceland, Greenland, the North Atlantic, the rivers of Eastern Europe. But getting there was dangerous. Ships could be damaged. Weather could turn. Navigation could fail. People could become sick. Conflicts could occur. And sometimes ships simply vanished. For the people left behind, there was no instant confirmation, no message, no official notice, just absence. And absence can be worse than certainty, because certainty ends waiting. Uncertainty keeps it alive. You look at the family again. Nobody speaks. The sea is beautiful, and that beauty feels almost cruel. Autumn arrives. You notice it before anyone announces it. The air changes. The mornings are darker. The animals become more important. The fields have been harvested. Food is being stored. Wood is being collected. Repairs are being finished. Everyone is preparing. Because winter is not simply a season. It is a logistical problem. How much food? How much fuel? How many animals? How strong is the roof? How much clothing? How much hay? How much grain? How much salt? How much can the household afford to lose? These questions become increasingly important as the days shorten. You walk through the storage area. The atmosphere is different now. People are counting, checking, moving things, drying things, protecting things. A household that has prepared well can enter winter with confidence. A household that has not is already in trouble. And the most frightening part is that nobody knows exactly how long the difficult period will feel. Winter comes quietly. One morning, the world is white. Another morning, the wind is so strong that nobody wants to open the door. The longhouse becomes the centre of existence. People live closer together. The fire matters more. Food matters more. Clothing matters more. Stories matter more. Work does not disappear. It moves indoors where possible. Spinning, repairing, carving, cooking, maintaining tools, planning, talking, waiting. Outside, the landscape is hostile. Inside, it is crowded. You can feel the warmth. You can smell smoke. You hear coughing. Someone is telling a story. Someone is sleeping. A child is restless. A dog is curled near the fire. And for hours, the world outside seems to disappear. This is where the social structure of the household becomes most obvious. You cannot escape the people you live with. If you dislike someone, you still see them. If someone snores, you hear them. If a child cries, everyone hears. If the fire needs tending, someone must get up. The longhouse is shelter. It is also confinement. And that contradiction is everywhere in Viking Age life. The things that protect you can also restrict you. Come closer. The fire is the centre of everything. Imagine what happens if it goes out. The room becomes cold. Cooking stops. Light disappears. The danger increases. So somebody must tend it. Again. And again. And again. This is one of the most invisible forms of historical labour. Modern people turn a switch. The past requires maintenance. Heat has to be produced. Light has to be produced. Food has to be produced. Clean water has to be obtained. Every comfort has a worker attached to it. You can see the same principle everywhere in the village. Warmth has a person behind it. Clothing has a person behind it. Food has a person behind it. Cleanliness has a person behind it. The Viking world is full of invisible labour, and once you notice it, you cannot stop noticing it. There is a persistent modern stereotype that Vikings were filthy. The reality is more complicated. People cared about appearance. They washed. They combed their hair. They used grooming tools. Archaeological finds include combs, tweezers, and other personal items. But cleanliness exists within the limits of available technology and environment. A person cannot take a hot shower whenever they want. Water must be obtained. heated, carried, used, and then disposed of. Still, the idea that people simply did not care about hygiene is wrong. They had standards. They cared about hair, clothing, appearance, odour, and social presentation. Imagine someone preparing for a feast. Their hair is arranged, their clothing is chosen, jewellery is put on. The person who looked exhausted and covered in work during the afternoon now looks different. The transformation is not because they suddenly became a different person. It is because people have always known how powerful presentation can be. Return to the household. There is a woman standing near the storage area. She has responsibility. Perhaps she manages access to important goods. Perhaps she knows exactly how much food remains. She knows which animals belong to whom. She knows which cloth is finished. She knows which visitor is expected. She knows which child has been sick. She knows which person owes another person something. This is not glamorous power. It does not look like a throne. But it is real. A household can be wealthy because someone manages its resources effectively. And this is another reason not to imagine Viking society only through warriors. Power is not always holding a sword. Sometimes power is knowing where everything is. Sometimes it is controlling stores. Sometimes it is owning land. Sometimes it is having the authority to make household decisions. Sometimes it is simply being the person everyone asks when something goes wrong. The harvest was successful. Everyone is relieved. But now look at the work it took. Fields had to be prepared, seeds planted, crops protected, harvest collected, grain dried, stored, processed. And the work did not end there. The land will need attention again. Animals need care. Tools need repair. Food needs preservation. A good harvest is not a single event. It is the result of thousands of small decisions, and one bad season can undo much of it. This is why people in agricultural societies pay close attention to weather. A modern person might look at a rainy week and complain. A farmer in the Viking Age might look at the same rain and calculate. Is it enough? Too much? Will the grain dry? Will the animals have enough? Will the road become impossible? Will the river rise? Weather is not background. Weather is an active participant. It is dark again. The village looks completely different. During the day, you could see its structure. Now you see little islands of light. One fire, then another, a lamp, a doorway, a glow through smoke. The darkness between houses is deep. There are no streetlights. Walk too far from the fire and the village disappears. You can hear animals, the wind, voices, perhaps music from one house. You realize how much darkness people in the past lived with. Night is not simply daytime without sunlight. It changes what is possible. Travel becomes harder. Work becomes harder. The world feels larger. And the stars become enormous. You look upward. There are no city lights, no airplanes, no glowing horizon. The sky is almost completely dark. The Milky Way is not a faint stripe hidden by modern light pollution. It is simply there. Ancient people lived beneath a sky that modern humans rarely see. And for someone standing outside this Viking village, the stars are part of the world. Not a picture, not an astronomy app, the actual sky. Back inside, someone is telling a story. The fire has burned lower. People are listening. This is where history becomes memory. Stories preserve family identities. Stories preserve reputations. Stories explain heroes and villains. They can teach children. They can entertain adults. They can transform events into something that can be remembered. A storyteller does not need a television. The room itself becomes the theatre. Voices rise and fall. People react. Someone laughs. Someone interrupts. Someone says that is not how it happened. Another person insists that it is. And you realize that storytelling is not simply entertainment. It is how a society stores information. Long before people can search a database, they can remember. And memory can travel. A story told in one household may eventually be told somewhere else. Years later, details change. New meanings appear. The story survives because it matters. Eventually, the story becomes quieter. Someone mentions a person who is no longer alive. And the mood changes. Death is closer here. not because people are constantly thinking about it, but because it is part of the physical environment. A person can die from disease, injury, old age, childbirth, violence, accident, exposure. The reasons are many, and burial practices can reveal how people understood death, status, family, and identity. Some burials contain objects, weapons, jewelry, tools, other items. The exact meaning varies and must be interpreted carefully. But the central point is simple. The dead mattered. People remembered them. They marked their passing. They incorporated them into family memory. And sometimes the objects buried with them tell archaeologists something about who they were. A person who lived 1,000 years ago can disappear from written history, but a small object can remain. A comb, a bead, a broken knife, a piece of metal, a fragment of cloth, something that once belonged to somebody, and suddenly the distance between you and them becomes smaller. There is something modern historical documentaries often leave out. Smell. This village has many. Smoke, wet wool, wood, animals, fish, cooking, human bodies, soil, sea air, leather, metal, bread, fermented drinks, mud. The smell changes with the weather. Rain makes everything stronger. Winter traps smoke. Summer brings animals closer. The smell of the sea travels inland. The longhouse carries the smell of generations. And because your sense of smell is connected so strongly to memory, this may be one of the most powerful ways to imagine historical life. You could close your eyes. Someone could blindfold you. And you would still know where you were. Smoke means the house. Salt means the sea. Wet wool means winter. Bread means the kitchen. Animals mean the farm. History is not only something you see, it is something you smell. Now imagine that you have been here for months. You have learned the routines. You know where the water comes from. You know which animal is dangerous. You know who likes to gossip. You know who can repair a broken tool. You know who tells the best stories. You know when the boats usually return. And yet there are things you would miss. Modern medicine, hot running water, privacy, reliable lighting, refrigeration, the ability to contact someone instantly, the certainty that food will be available tomorrow. But there are things you might not expect to miss. Silence. Not silence exactly. Something else. A world without constant information. The village can be noisy, but the information arriving from beyond it is limited. There are no notifications, no endless headlines, no stream of strangers' opinions. If a trader does not arrive, you don't know what happened. If another kingdom is fighting, you may hear about it much later. The world beyond the horizon exists, but it does not constantly enter your mind. Your attention belongs to what is physically around you. The fire, the food, the weather, the people, the animals, the work, the sea. There is something strangely focused about that. But you would also discover things you would be very happy to leave behind. A wound that refuses to heal. A winter that will not end. A harvest that fails. A dangerous childbirth. A ship lost at sea. A fire. A feud. A powerful person abusing authority. A child becoming sick. A loved one disappearing. The Viking village is not a fantasy world. It is a human world. And human worlds contain joy and fear in the same room. That is why we should resist both extremes. The Viking Age was not a golden age of freedom and adventure, nor was it simply a miserable existence of cold huts and violence. It was something much more interesting, a functioning society, built by people who had adapted to their environment, people who solved problems with the knowledge available to them, people who loved their families, people who wanted status, people who wanted security, people who sometimes wanted adventure, and people who, like us, occasionally just wanted the day to go smoothly. Another morning arrives. You wake beside the fire. The same cough, the same dog, the same smell of smoke. But now you recognize them. You know where you are. You hear someone moving near the doorway. A child is already awake. The fire is being stirred. Outside, animals are waiting. The day is beginning again. And this is where the entire experience becomes strangely profound. Because nothing dramatic happened. There was no battle, no famous king, no legendary raid, no treasure. Just another day. And that is precisely the point. History is overwhelmingly made of days like this. Days when nobody writes anything down. Days when no monument is built. Days when the most important event is that the grain did not burn. Someone repaired a shoe. Someone brought water. Someone made bread. Someone held a baby. Someone sharpened a tool. Someone laughed. Someone argued. Someone looked toward the sea. Someone waited for a ship. Someone went to sleep. Then they did it again. And again. And again. Until their ordinary lives became the archaeological traces we are now trying to understand. Step outside one last time. Look at the village. From here, it seems small. The houses, the fields, the animals, the shore, the people moving through their routines. But the world connected to this place is enormous. The ships that leave here may travel hundreds or thousands of miles. Silver can arrive from distant lands. Objects can cross seas. Stories can cross generations. People can migrate. Ideas can travel. Languages can change. Religions can change. Political systems can change. A small settlement can sit inside a huge network. That is one of the most important things to remember about the Viking Age. The village is not isolated simply because it looks isolated. The sea connects it. The rivers connect it. Trade connects it. Family connects it. War connects it. Migration connects it. And curiosity connects it. The people here know there is a world beyond the horizon. Some will go to see it. Some will never leave. Both choices are reasonable. Now imagine removing every modern image from the scene. No horned helmet. No Hollywood soundtrack. No dramatic slow-motion battle. No giant warrior shouting into the wind. Instead, a woman grinding grain. A child chasing a dog. A farmer checking the weather. A man repairing a boat. Someone spinning wool. A smith working metal. A fisherman returning from the water. A family waiting for someone who has not come home. An old person telling a story. A fire burning in the centre of a dark room. This is the Viking world too. And perhaps it is the more important version. Because raiding is memorable. Daily life is what makes raiding possible. Ships do not appear from nowhere. Food does not appear from nowhere. Clothing does not appear from nowhere. Warriors do not appear from nowhere. Every famous expedition rests on ordinary labour. Someone grew the food. Someone made the clothes. Someone repaired the boat. Someone maintained the house. Someone cared for the animals. Someone waited. The dramatic Viking story sits on top of an enormous foundation of ordinary work. Let's return to the longhouse. It is late. The fire is low. The village is quiet. You can hear breathing. The wind outside. A piece of wood shifting in the fire. The room is warm enough. Not perfectly warm, but warm enough. Someone is asleep nearby. The dog has curled into itself. A child is breathing softly. You lie down. The blanket is rough. The air smells of smoke. You can feel the earth beneath you. For a moment, imagine what the person who sleeps here might dream about. Perhaps tomorrow. Perhaps the harvest. Perhaps the sea. Perhaps someone they love. Perhaps a journey. Perhaps nothing at all. We often imagine historical people as if they knew they were living in history. They did not. They were simply living. They did not wake up and think. Today is the year 982. I am now experiencing the Viking Age. They woke because the fire needed attention. They worked because food was needed. They laughed because something was funny. They worried because somebody was sick. They celebrated because a ship came home. They mourned because someone did not. And then they slept, just as you are about to. Thousands of years do not preserve everything. Most of these people disappeared without leaving a written biography. We don't know their favourite joke. We don't know exactly what they dreamed about. We don't know what one particular mother whispered to her child before sleep. We don't know which farmer was proudest of his harvest. We don't know which young person secretly wanted to leave the village. Most names are gone. Most voices are gone. Most ordinary days are gone. But pieces remain. A house floor, a fire pit, a broken comb, a tool, a bead, a piece of iron, animal bones, seeds, a ship, a burial, a fragment of cloth. And from these small pieces, historians and archaeologists reconstruct an entire world. It is imperfect. It has to be. We should never pretend that archaeology gives us a complete photograph of the past. It gives us clues. And the careful historian follows those clues without pretending to know what cannot be known. That is important, because the people who lived here deserve better than becoming characters in a fantasy. They were real. Their world was complicated. Their lives were sometimes beautiful, sometimes frightening, sometimes boring, often both within the same day. And there is one final contradiction I want you to keep. The Viking Age is remembered for movement, ships, exploration, migration, raiding, trade. But most people spent most of their lives doing the opposite: staying, working, maintaining, waiting. A sailor might travel enormous distances, but someone had to stay home. Someone had to care for the farm. Someone had to maintain the household. Someone had to raise children. Someone had to produce clothing. Someone had to harvest food. Someone had to wait for the ship to return. The famous mobility of the Viking world depended upon enormous amounts of stillness. And perhaps that is why the village matters so much. It is the place people return to, the place that made journeys possible, the place that remembered who had left, the place that waited. And now the darkness is beginning to change. You notice it before you see the light. The blackness near the doorway has become grey. The fire has collapsed into glowing embers. Someone moves. A blanket shifts. The dog lifts its head. Outside, a bird calls. Then another. The village is beginning again. You step outside. The air is cold. The horizon is pale. Smoke begins rising from another roof. Then another. A person carries water. A child appears in the doorway. Somebody opens a pen. The animals begin making noise. The same world. Another day. And you realize that this is what history has been all along. Not a collection of dates. Not a parade of kings. Not only battles and voyages. It is this. 1,000 ordinary mornings. 1,000 fires. 1,000 meals. 1,000 people waking before sunrise. 1,000 children growing up. 1,000 families trying to protect what they have. 1,000 ships leaving. 1,000 people waiting for them. And eventually, after all those ordinary mornings, the world changes. The old houses disappear. The people die. The language changes. The religion changes. The ships rot. The fields change hands. And centuries later, someone finds a piece of the old world beneath the soil. A piece of bone. A piece of wood. A piece of metal. A tiny clue. And they ask, "Who lived here?" You already know the answer. People. People who woke up cold. People who smelled smoke. People who worked. People who worried. People who waited. People who loved. People who waited. People who looked toward the sea and wondered what was beyond it. People who had no idea that someday strangers would call them Vikings. So for tonight, let the village become quiet again. The animals have settled. The tools have been put away. The boats rest beside the water. The fields are dark. The last light has disappeared from the doorway. Inside the longhouse, the fire is burning low. There is still a little warmth in the room. Enough. You can hear the soft movement of someone turning in their sleep. A dog breathes near the hearth. Someone coughs once. Then silence. Not complete silence. The wind is still there. The sea is still moving. The roof is still creaking. But the day's work is finished. For a few hours, nobody needs to grind grain. Nobody needs to repair the fence. Nobody needs to watch the weather. Nobody needs to watch the weather. Nobody needs to know what is happening beyond the horizon. The village can simply sleep. And perhaps that is the most human image of the entire Viking age. Not the warrior, not the ship, not the sword, the sleeping person. Because after everything else is stripped away, that is something we still recognize. A tired body, a warm fire, a familiar roof, people nearby, and the hope that tomorrow will be manageable. The people who lived here did not know what the future would become. They could not see the kingdoms that would rise. They could not see Christianity spreading through their world. They could not see the political changes that would eventually transform Scandinavia. They could not see the end of the age that modern historians would later name for them. They only had tomorrow, and tomorrow was enough. So let the fire become smaller. Let the smoke drift upward. Let the village disappear into darkness. The boats are still at the shore. The fields are waiting for morning. The animals are sleeping. The people are sleeping. And somewhere beyond the dark water, the sea is moving quietly toward another shore. You don't need to follow it tonight. You can stay here. The village is safe for the moment. The fire is still warm, and there is nothing left to do. Just rest, and let the Viking village sleep. Good night.